Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros MLB. This is the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia. With me, of course, is the Welsh, and it's time to hit the guides. That's right. It's time for the Ultimate Infield Guide. We're going to go through the positions, give you a little overview of the top guys at the position, give you our favorite sleepers, our busts, and our must-haves at those positions. And, of course, if you're looking to check out the ranks for yourself, you can go to FantasyPros.com to do so, and we encourage you to do that, of course, all the time. And, of course, if you're looking for the ultimate cheat sheet, that's right. You're looking for the ultimate opportunity, the cheat code of all cheat codes. We're talking about Draft Wizard. So right now you can go download Draft Wizard. The app is available for Draft Wizard MLB. Download that bad boy today. You can get live draft advice, player recommendations. Every time you're on the clock, you can run 1,000,000 draft simulations. What are you doing this weekend? I'll tell you what you're doing this weekend. You are running draft simulations. That's what you're doing. And don't forget to sync your leagues for free, because the draft software will go right to your league and help you make recommendations. It'll help give you expert advice. You can use the pick predictor, the cheat sheets, all kinds of amazing tools. But that only comes when you download the Draft Wizard. So do it right now, or head over to fantasypros.com/MLB Draft Wizard today. All right, Welsh, let's start at first base. I don't want to start at catcher. Catcher's a little boring for me. I know, right? Exactly. So first base it is today, and we're going to run through the top guys at the position here and give you a little overview. At the top, of course, Vlad Jr. going at 16 overall right now, currently in ADP. Bryce Harper, Freddie Freeman, Matt Olson, Pete Alonso. Then I think there's a dip here. You have guys like Diaz, who, again, I'd rather put on a catcher than at first base. Josh Naylor, Christian Walker. Two guys that have moved locations here: Cody Bellinger, Spencer Steer, Tristan Casas, Vinny Pasquantino. So there's definitively a group at the top of sluggers. After that, a group where you think you can probably get some power out of guys like Naylor and guys like Christian Walker, Cody Bellinger, hopefully on a bounce back. And then it's kind of a little bit of a leap of faith, maybe with Casas and Pasquantino. But to me, first base is a little bit more of a priority. I like to hit it early. How about you?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I've got these clumps. Obviously, Vlad and Bryce Harper make a lot of sense. I'm a little bit fadey of maybe Freeman. I'm not super interested in Olson and Alonso. So it's like, I'm going to have to essentially pick a second round for a first baseman, or then I'm skipping for a while. Then we go into that like third tier of first baseman, which you talk about, which I think is going to be my sweet spot and something I have to target. And then another just deep thing to think about, we're going to talk about it here. Third base depth isn't fantastic. So if you have a corner infield spot, I'm personally trying to fill my corner infield spot from first base. And you can go deeper if you want, because I think there's some nice sleepers. We're going to talk about some of those guys. But even if you wanted to take away from that core top 12, top 14 of first baseman, you're just not going to hurt yourself if you invested in, let's just say, first baseman number 6 and first baseman number 10, because the cost is a little depreciated with really great returns. So yeah, I don't want to wait too long in my investment on first base, but I'm going in tiers and little chunks of the guys that are my targets.
All right, let's talk about sleepers too, because obviously a lot of leagues have corner spots, and a guy that I like at the corner spot is Alec Burleson of the St. Louis Cardinals. That was one of our favorite waiver wire pickups last year. He really took off. He's got position flexibility too, which is also a nice thing to have for a player when you're drafting them a little later. And if you look at what he did last year, Welsh, I mean, across the board, incredibly productive on a team that was really underwhelming. He cracked 70 runs and 70 RBI. He had 9 steals. He had 267, 21 home runs. To me, he's kind of like the modern day version potentially of Ben Zobrist, like a guy who just kind of gives you a little of everything. Is he spectacular? No, but certainly a guy that can be productive. And I do expect some incremental improvements from St. Louis year over year, because I think last year was a little bit of an anomaly, and I think some of these kids hopefully will start to get it. Maybe this will be the Jordan Walker year, maybe Masyn Winn, some of the other guys really start to take the next step forward. Burleson's a guy for me. Who's a sleeper for you at first base?
Yeah, one thing I want to point out with Burleson, I like this one too. Deeper league play, and the Cardinals have lost so many players into free agent. They're the only team, as we record this, that has not signed a single free agent. They haven't signed a single free agent of all MLB teams, which is crazy. So Burleson's going to get an opportunity to move up in the lineup. It's kind of a all tides rise the boats? Is that
you were so close?
I was so close.
New Welshism is born. A rising tide raises all ships or boats. Or
there you go. Okay, and the tide here is all of these guys coming out and then moving up in the lineup. So That's my great analogy here. I'll do something better than analogies. I'll give you a sleeper that I really like instead.
Please.
I could probably do a
I
little
mean,
bit
I
better
could
at
hear the
that.
analogies all day, but I'll take a sleeper.
Yeah, I couldn't handle the comments all day. But the guy I'm going to go with, because I like your Burleson here, I'm going to go with Michael Toglia with the Colorado Rockies. I've talked about Toglia a decent amount this offseason. The overall like big hit profile is pretty enormous. He had a 17% barrel rate with a 50% hard hit rate. Those are monstrous numbers. Now, he's got a strikeout problem and he had a batting average problem. He only hit 218 last year and he had a 32% strikeout rate. Those stink. The positives, though, take that hitting profile. He had an expected batting average of close to 240, which I really, really like. And he hits in Colorado. It's the most hitter-friendly environment you can have. And one of my main points to this is his ADP is around like 170 or so. I don't believe, he's in the top 12 of who you mentioned or even top 15. Power can be hard to come by. Like, I think we all pick and choose these different things. Okay, I got to focus on stolen bases. No longer do we care about trying to find stolen bases late. You can find it all the time. The two pieces that seem harder in the hitting world to find later in drafts are A, batting average, which he doesn't help you with, but B, elite power, not just power. Alec Burleson, 20 homers, awesome, great. He has better batting average. But finding 35 plus home run power outside the top 150, it's not 100% there. Toglia does provide that. Toglia could be a 40 home run hitter. He can't hit 220 again, but I think the hitting profile works really well in Colorado, where he should be hitting, again, higher in a lineup. Hopefully there's RBI opportunities. I think he's a sleeper. He fits for all teams, and I really think there's a possibility that batting average doesn't become some big albatross to your team like a Joey Gallo. So Toglia is a sleeper for me.
By the way, one more note on Burleson, too, before we move on to the bus. Looks like he's projected at number 2 in that order, too, between Contreras and then Winn at the top. So I also like that, too. Lineup spot matters a lot, and that's what Welsh was talking about, his guy in Colorado, too. Okay, so if there's sleepers, there's also busts. Bust at the position for me. Ryan Mountcastle. And Ryan Mountcastle, I know that's Mike Mayer's favorite player, and I know he's going to get very mad at me for saying this, but 3 years in a row, declining home runs and declining power. And, some of the games played the last couple of years, but a little limited too. Now he's still hitting that at 270 range, but my whole thing is I feel like he's about to get squeezed out of Baltimore potentially. Kobe Mayo eventually is going to come up, and that's going to create some sort of logjam at the corners because you got to have the DH spot kind of locked up. You could play him at DH too, but I don't know. I just feel like the new blood of the Baltimore Orioles is really pushing forward there, and it's going to continue to push this year. And I feel like Mountcastle might be a guy that is dealt at some point by the trade deadline, potentially, if some more of these young guys push him out. Or worse, he gets in this weird rotational thing where he's not like an everyday player. And that to me is also potentially bust worthy. So Mountcastle is a guy that I'm personally avoiding in 2025. Welsh, who are you avoiding at first base?
CES, Christian Encarnacion-Strand. And I could eat my words on this one because obviously last year just wasn't great. There's a ton of missed time. There really wasn't a ton of at-bats. The hitting profile was completely different, but I think in theory, you could chalk that up to the injury. And that's kind of the big thing. There's a couple guys that I'm just not really buying bounce backs. We're going to talk about a guy in a little bit at third base. It's kind of the same thing because in this past year, barrel percentage dipped, expected batting average dipped, strikeouts were still incredibly high, and he stopped walking whatsoever. But comparative to the year prior, Strand had an 11% or 10% barrel rate, 48% hard hit rate, which was elite. He walked 2% more of the time, and he had an XBA of 270 after he hit 270. So it was like, oh, this might be a power hitter with batting average. The injury depleted some of that, so it could be one of those two ways. I watched him in the Arizona Fall League. It doesn't seem comfortable still. Positionally, they don't know where he's going. They were talking about the outfield. He doesn't want to be there. And the Reds are collecting players like it's Pokemon. They're Austin Hayes. They're trying to trade for Luis Robert. They're getting everybody. And it's looking like a situation where Strand is going to be put in at best, maybe a situational player. So I'm just not in on it. The profile, what I saw in the Arizona Fall League was kind of athletically. I don't know if the Reds fully trust him. His cost is still kind of up there. So I am going to be busting CES. No thanks.
All right. Must-haves. I don't want to spend too much time on this guy because we talked about him in some of our undervalued shows that we just did. The undervalued hitter show should be up there on the YouTube channel. Go check that out. But Tristan Casas, he's going to have Duran and Devers hitting ahead of him. I think he's going to see a lot of fastballs this year, and I think he's in a really good spot. He's projected to hit third in that lineup right now over on Fangraphs and the roster resource there. And I think that when you look at some of the projections, you see Zips has him at 29 home runs. Steamer's got him at 28. if you somehow miss out on the Christian Walker, Josh Naylor grouping, right? You don't get the elite guys, and then man, that run happens and you miss out. The way to make up for it, like who's a guy that can hit 260 and 30 home runs? I think it's Tristan Casas, and I think that's just an easy win for me. And you've seen I've drafted him in some of our mocks already because I feel like that's also a really good return on investment. If I can't get the elite power at the price that I want early on, then the pivot there is hoping that he can deliver that same promise. Who for you is a must-have at first base in 2025, Welsh?
Yeah, remember I talked about these three buckets. There's like the number one, which is Vlad and Harper. You can probably throw Freeman in there. And then two is kind of that Olsen, Alonso range. No thanks. That third bucket starts in with, I think Casas is the end of it. Naylor is in there. The guy that I want is in that bucket. And you mentioned him, Christian Walker. So Christian Walker is the start of it. He's a must-have for me. The cost isn't prohibitive, really, with whatever you've done. Obviously, if you went and drafted Vlad, it wouldn't make a ton of sense. But Walker goes from a nice hitting environment in Arizona to an even better hitting environment in Houston. He hit 26 homers last year with a 251 average, but you've got an even shorter porch, which looks like, from a projected standpoint, Baseball Savant does the like how many homers would they hit if they were here. He had 25 only in this one ballpark. He had 25 homers in Arizona, projected to be 28, so a 3 home run boost in Houston by virtue of that. But it's just such a great short porch. It's an incredible offense around him as well. You're going to have Altuve, you've got Jordan Alvarez. He should hit at a prominent spot in the lineup. He's a 100 RBI guy, Gold Glove. He's always going to be out there. I just think Christian Walker just went into as good of a situation as you could possibly have in a ballpark that is going to feed to how he hits the ball in general. So for him to be going around, like 70, 80 or something like that, he's an absolute must have at first. Or you want to be like the 1%ers, you want to be Richie Rich, get him at a corner infield, go and take one of the top guys and then take him off the board. 3,100 with, I think, a boost in batting averages in play, maybe in the 270 range for Walker this year. Got to have him.
Welsh on to second base, and the sleeper might make people laugh for me, but it's Jackson Holliday. Why? Because last year, everybody was falling all over themselves for Jackson Holliday. I, of course, pumped the brakes a little bit. Oh, gee whiz, I wasn't quite ready for the big leagues. For those of you who watch Leading Off, you know what that voice is. But this is a new year. It's a new time. And you don't go from being arguably the number one prospect in baseball typically to being a complete and utter bust. And he's being drafted right now in a situation where if you start to look at some of the second baseman, I'm going to run down them here. Mookie Betts at the top. Again, position flexibility there. Ketel Marte, great. Jose Altuve, Ozzie Albies, Marcus Semien. It's a very solid group there. Some real veterans, but some health issues with, I think, all three of those guys. Jordan Westburg, Matt McClain, also a health issue coming back. Bryce Terang, Luis Garcia, Nico Horner, Xander Bogaerts, Bryson Stott, Rafaela and Jimenez right on that peripheral. And then you have to go all the way down to the 17th guy overall at the position in Jackson Holliday. And I'm thinking to myself, can Jackson Holliday potentially outperform Rafaela, Jimenez, guys like Bryson Stott? I think he absolutely can. So to me, that makes him a sleeper this year. He got rid of the big leg kick too, going to that toe tap. I think that will help him a little bit. And I think really it was just pushed a little bit too soon and unfortunately didn't go well. But I think 2025 might be a different story. And this is when I'm buying the dip in the post hype. I think it's the perfect situation. Give me a sleeper for you at second base and what you think of the position.
Yeah, I'm also going to tell you, this is probably the first one so far in this show where it's like, oh, you took a guy that I probably would have put. So sometime I'm trying to pivot off, not get the exact ones. Yeah, I would have put Jackson Holliday. Great barrel, good hard hit, struggled against sliders. Young dude who got pushed up 4 levels in a year prior. I think there's a pretty easy work like that. It's like you said, you're getting into the toe tap. You're going to work on hitting some of that off-speed breaking stuff because he can hit fastballs. He's done it in the minors, and he has a really good underlying hit profile. So I'm there with you. I'm totally there with you on him. As far as the position goes in general, second base always has this kind of weakness that it feels. I think it is deeper than some years prior, but I think that deepness more speaks to middle infield. Getting your starter. I still don't want to wait and be like, all right, I'm the last guy that got a second baseman, because then you're going to be swimming in a pool that's just not going to feel great. You're going to be playing from behind, and then you're probably going to have to try to maybe up take a shortstop. Now, the only reason maybe you could do it is if you double tap shortstop. Sometimes people will go shortstop early and then shortstop in middle. And maybe that middle infield shortstop can make up for some deficiencies that you might have had at second base. But, I'm not really sure that you want, even as much as I love Luis Rengifo, you want him as like your starter, or even Bryce Terang unless you're chasing stolen bases. So I'm trying to attack it a little bit early if I possibly can. If you don't, we'll go to my sleeper. I think this is a solid, deeper league middle infield player that I'm going to be targeting. Former potential 2020 player. It's Jonathan India, who was traded over to the Kansas City Royals. India last year, when it really wasn't a great year, 15 homers, 13 stolen bases, hit just under 250, had best OBP over the last couple years. In fact, 12.6% walk rate, highest of his career and top 3 percentile of the league. Why does that matter? He's going to go potentially hit leadoff for the Royals. You got Bobby Witt Jr. You've got Salvador Perez hitting behind you. You have Vinny Pasquantino. That opens up a huge opportunity for runs. This team also runs on the base path, so you might see that uptick. Projections aren't really putting that in play. ATC projections are pretty light on him, around a 250 batting average. Homers and stolen bases are both under 15. I think there's a legit shot that Jonathan India can get into that 2020 range. The profile in general is pretty solid, almost 8% barrel. His expected batting average was close to 270, so it was higher than it was last year. He struck out under 20% of the time and he walked a ton. Hey, you're at the top of that Royals lineup with a bunch of monsters behind you. You might jump into 90 RBI. You steal 20 plus bases. You get some homers. All of a sudden, he goes from a guy that is going 250, 220 or something like that into maybe being a top 150 overall player. So I think India is a really nice second base sleeper.
All right, let's talk about bust at second base. Bryson Stott is one for me. He's in the 9-hole in that Phillies lineup. The power is limited. I mean, I know he had 15 homers in 2023, but went back down to 11 last year. The strikeout rate went up last year too. I get it. In roto leagues, you covet the stolen bases, so I totally understand why he's still in that top 12 range. But I keep going back to who's a superior hitter, in my opinion. Is it Bryson Stott or what Jackson Holliday can be? Or guys like that are going after Bryson Stott. So for me, it's a no-brainer. It's not that he's a bad player. I think he also had some big moments in the postseason too, which I think might a little bit overinflate his value artificially. So I want to stay away from that. I don't like when that happens. It's a very small sample size. So Welsh, who's the guy you're avoiding at second base?
Man, I'm having a realization that I'm picking on a lot of Reds players, and I'm going to probably pick on some more.
I mean, CES used to be your guy, and now who are you going to pick on?
I'm going to pick on Matt McClain. I will tell you.
I like McClain. I'm buying back in. AFL, coming back from the injury. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think he'll be okay.
It's part of the problem. So, I also like Matt McClain. Here's what I don't like. There's no discount. He's going inside the top 100 right now. I don't like the discount. He did not play last year, except in the Arizona Fall League, where I saw him personally every single day. And he still had some of the warts. That was my hope. If you're gone for an entire year, he was during instructs. I actually caught him at Reds instructs. He had been out there working on the field, batting.
Instructs, by the way.
Yeah, well, it's the instructional league where there's nothing going on. You would have hoped during that time, maybe let's take a look at the year prior. Let's get some fixes. Specifically, what I'm talking about is that strikeout rate. It looked as bad as ever in the Arizona Fall League. Now, maybe that's, you lost the whole season. You're trying to be hyper aggressive. Anything super high on fastballs, attack, swing through, he's striking out. He was just eating low breaking stuff outside the zone. And my problem with that is he had a 28.5% strikeout rate the year prior when he played. Now, how he got through that, he barreled the ball 10%, 42% hard hit rate, and his expected batting average was there. He gets stuff done. He's kind of like Spencer Steer, in fact, if you look at it as a whole. I'm just worried that maybe it is the same thing like Steer. Can he get to 2020? Absolutely. But I'm worried it's going to be at a 220 or 230 batting average. He's going to have big swings. He's coming off of this injury where he missed a year, and he looked rusty in the Arizona Fall League. So for me to pay a top 100 value or cost on that, I'm not super interested, especially, by the way, I just mentioned a guy like Jonathan India. Jonathan India could put up, 90% of what Matt McClain is at 150 picks later. So I'm going to be fading Matt McClain this year. I'm worried the strikeout rate is going to have an ultimate effect on his total value. And I don't know how Terry Francona is going to just sit around and just, all right, let's let him get through it. McClain might be hitting lower in the lineups as well. They might start platooning because, again, it's Pokemon for Terry Francona. It's Pokemon Go. He is out there and he sees mystery player. He signs them, picks them up, and he puts them in the rotation for the Reds. I am just personally going to be out on drafting Matt McClain inside the top 100.
All right, I'm still probably in right around there, but so far in the drafts I've seen, it's been a little bit of a discount, the ones I've been in so far. This grouping too, and we're going to get to the must-haves here. Jose Altuve is still going as the third guy. I still prefer Albies, probably Simeon too. I mean, Altuve's 34 years old, and I think at a certain point in time, you got to start taking that into effect. There's going to be even more decline.
You say the
But
third or first guy?
he's typically going as the third guy overall.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just saying, I'd rather have Albies or Simeon probably over him. That's me. That's my rankings personally going into this season.
I think Simeon is a huge value because you didn't say Marte, so it threw me off. Like, tell
well,
Marte
because I said there's a first two,
guy.
the clear cut. Let's Betts and it's Marte. It's a clear shelf there. But then I look at the stat line last year for Altuve, and I look at the stat line this year for Luis Garcia Jr., and I keep coming back to the same thing. And I know he's my guy this year, and I'm going to pound the table every show for him. But 18 homers, 22 stolen bases, 70 RBI last year, 58 runs scored. And I think, this lineup for the Nationals is going to be far improved. You're going to get a whole season of James Wood. You're hopefully going to get a productive season from Dylan Cruz. We can only hope that Nathaniel Lowe is going to add a little bit more presence to that lineup along with Bell. So I think he's in a good, solid lineup. And it's funny because when we started hyping him up, he was about, I would say, 100 picks different than Jose Altuve. That gap is closing about 75 in an NFBC right now drafts. It's even less. So clearly people are also starting to pick up on that same fact there with him. So who's your must-have guy? Garcia's mine. Who's yours at second base?
Interesting thing too, a couple notes to just throw in there. Altuve has apparently been working in the outfield. The rumors of Bregman were to sign, so you could get some more position eligibility. And also want to point out, Mookie Betts, I believe, should only qualify at second base in Yahoo. He had, I think it was 18 games at second base.
Excuse me, I want to ask you a question. Do you like that more? Because sometimes when guys move positions, especially all-star, like it doesn't always go like Craig Biggio, like where it's just like, yeah, it's fine. Some guys when they go and they move, they struggle in the transition from infield to outfield specifically.
Okay. So I thought you were going to ask like the positions because like Tatis did this and he got outfield eligibility and he was still really good.
Much different body type, much different athlete, I think too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be weird. I'm not sure it's going to affect the game, but I'm also pretty open to like external things like that can affect these players. Like, sometimes like a guy that was always a hitter going in DH, something to think about with like Mike Trout.
Like eligibility, good. Changing of that mindset. Sometimes the confidence level gets shaken a little bit. I don't know. I'm just saying like, it's not always sunshine and roses when a guy changes positions.
Sure. And it might not be.
Especially at this stage in his career. He's an older player.
Yeah. And then again, just the Mookie Betts thing, 18 games, I believe, at second base. So Yahoo, he will qualify. He shouldn't in some of the other spots. I also personally believe we should change the qualifications to not 20, but not 5. So make it 10 or 15, but that's just me. All right. My guy, I'm going to go with a guy that have played a bunch of games at 2 different positions. I think people consider him on the other side because that will be his position, but he qualifies at second base. So my must-have is Jordan Westburg. I've talked a bunch about him. He's going around like I think it's like the 7th or 8th or maybe even 6th second baseman. The point is you can draft him, and that's why he becomes a must-have. This isn't like saying, guys, Ketel Marte, you got to have. No, Jordan Westburg, he's a must-have. 18 homers, 6 stolen bases, 264 batting average last year. Great hitting profile. I love over 10% barrel and 45% hard hit rate. He hits that. Lowered his strikeout rate the year prior, hits the ball really hard, 91.1 average exit velocity. And the Orioles, they're bringing in that left field. I've said it a bunch on shows to make it a little bit more hitter friendly. So you've already got this kind of like monster profile that hit the ball really well. By the way, his expected batting average was around 280. So it was even better with this great profile, better expected batting average, lowering the strikeouts. He can run, he can hit. Legitimate shot at 25-10. Maybe it's going to go 30-15, somewhere in there. The ballpark's becoming better. He's going to hit in a prominent spot for the Orioles lineup. So I'm really into it. Jordan Westburg with third and second base qualification is my must-have second baseman.
All right, over to the hot corner. The third baseman look like this over on Fantasy Pros consensus ADP, which again, you can find over fantasypros.com. Jose Ramirez over at the top 5 player overall, in my opinion, still maybe even top 3. I mean, if you want to get to that argument when you look at third base as a whole. Vlad Guerrero Jr., Jazz Chisholm, Rafael Devers, Austin Riley. This is interesting because I think there's warts on all these guys, although they all have incredible talent and have all been super productive at one time or another. You could pick each one apart and find a negative on each one. Devers coming off a down year, Jazz Chisholm's injury history last year, Austin Riley looking lost, then getting hurt, and Vlad, who has struggled at times, and maybe the pressure of a contract year does get to him. Maybe it doesn't. Second half of last year was brilliant. After that, Manny Machado at 6, Mark Vientos at 7, who is my favorite thing in 2025. Jordan Westburg, Junior Caminero, Royce Lewis, very risky in the top 10. As of recording this, still waiting for Bregman to sign somewhere. Jake Berger, Matt Chapman, Eugenio Suarez, who was awful in the first half, and then all of a sudden a completely different human being at 14. So that's kind of like your rough version there of the top 12-ish at the position.
One thing to add, like Mookie, Vlad will only qualify at third base in Yahoo. He played 12 games at third base, which was, I was shocked when I actually saw, because I saw the qualification. I was like, would he play 5? No, he played 12 at third base.
At third base once, and now Yahoo has it.
So only Yahoo should be the one that has the third base qualification. Anywhere else, ESPN, NFBC, I believe CBS, are all 20-game eligibility. So he wouldn't be the top third baseman. But Yahoo, you'll get that extra little push.
Yeah, so looking at this, again, I'm willing to let this market come to me because I think there is a very strong middle there. Riley, Machado, Vientos, those are all really strong guys. And for me, a sleeper as a corner guy to me, once again, Isaac Paredes, right? He's going to be hitting in a good spot potentially in this order. Now, Bregman signing could maybe change a little of this. We're still waiting to find that out. But as of right now, Bregman is not back with the Houston Astros, and there's a chance here that you could see Paredes hitting in that 2 spot, which I think is terrific for that run scored total. He is not that far removed from a big-time power season. We know all the stats about, well, if you dropped him in last year, all those home run totals would have been a lot higher year over year. So there's a lot of reasons to like Paredes, and he's a lot younger, too, than people realize, which I think, people just take for granted. He's kind of been around a while, but if he is sandwiched between Altuve and Alvarez, man, Welsh, that's a really good spot to be. Who's a sleeper for you in 2025 at the hot corner?
Chalk it up that this is 100% going to be mine. This was mine. Joey beat it to it. I completely co-sign on this one. His draft stock is just low. Again, like what he did in Tampa Bay, I think is in play here for Isaac Paredes because it's a low porch. He is a pull. He doesn't have a good hitting profile. That's the thing. And that's why the Cubs, he was exposed. It was just like, doesn't barrel, doesn't hit the ball hard. Like what's going on? But what he does is he pulls fly balls, 22% launch angle. And now you're going to go in one of the best places to do that in Houston. So like, Paredes is just undervalued. I like that. Not picking Paredes, I went with someone that I have a high rank on. And I will be frank, this could change because there could be a wrinkle thrown into it. But I'm going to go with Matt Shaw. Matt Shaw, everyone trying to figure out position qualifications for him as far as like what he did in the minors. But Shaw is coming off of a 20-homer, 30 stolen base season in the minors. He is perceivably set to be the third baseman for the Cubs this year, where he is not going to have to be like Paredes, and he's not like a bad hitting profile guy that's just going to have wall scraping homers. Like, no, the guy can dominate. I mean, the stolen base numbers have actually been pretty shocking. He finished up last minor league season by going and playing in the Premier 12 USA tournament where he was the best player. And you had like Carson Williams playing there, Tamar Johnson. He was hands down the best player offensively, crushing more home runs. He is ready. And there's a reason why they moved off of Paredes to do it. But if Bregman were to sign there, it does really kind of throw a wrinkle into stuff because they'd have to trade Horner to get Matt Shaw back in there. But his cost is really, really efficient. I think he, by the way, he's number 2 in NL Rookie of the Year voting, yet I believe his ADP is outside the top 200. So, if you think that he is going to play all season long, he's going to beat projections. He's going to be close to a 2020 guy, and he is a definite sleeper that you can get at like corner infield cost. And he'd qualify, I think, in middle infield in some spots at shortstop.
All right, let's talk about the busts here on the other side of the coin here. And look, I know Baltimore kind of had a glut of prospects, so they could afford to move a couple. But, when you love a prospect, quote unquote, and then you move on from him, sometimes I think that's a bit of a red flag. I also don't like the lineup where this player ended up either, hitting in Miami now. It's Connor Norby, and it's not because I don't think he can be a productive player. I do. I think it's far too early. He's only 25 years old, to think that he can't be a good, solid, everyday player for the Marlins. He can be. The thing is, it's one thing to be an up-and-coming prospect in an organization, and you end up in a lineup that's got a lot of protection and a lot of help, and you can easily be productive and make a transition. I think it's much harder in a place where the talent is a little less, or in this case, a lot less. I just don't feel like Norby, despite the fact that he's probably going to hit in 2, is going to deliver on the promise, at least not this year. I think it's going to be a tough transition. And, I always go back to a great example of this is JD Martinez early in his career, right, with the Astros, when they were so bad and there was nobody around him. And then he got traded to Detroit and he got dropped in a lineup there with the protection of Miguel Cabrera, and his career just completely took off. And I'm just saying it's just much harder for young players to not have proper lineup production and reach their ceiling quickly. So, Welsh, who are you out on potentially this year in 2025 at third base?
By the way, that's an interesting one because I feel like his cost is so low, it's hard for him to be a bust. He also has some really good underlying profile metrics, but it's of one of the
But he's
worst.
still a
Like what?
buzzy, like, ooh, kind of Norby prospect guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and we all know those dynasty circles that they run hot on those
No,
prospect
sure.
names, and people go, this guy's gonna be really useful. I just don't know if he's going to be useful. But you're right, it's not gonna cost you too much to find out.
But
But
also,
it is a
there's
name I
nothing.
just want to be dangerous. I think might be
Yeah, and
this
there's
year.
not a ton there. That was the other thing that's like on your side. It's like there's not a lot of support. There's not a lot of RBI opportunities. So I don't know what that's going to look like. There could be some K problems. So that's a really interesting one. Mine comes back similar to Strand. This is me, and this is why like I don't think I can be right on all these guys that I'm picking on from this metric. So one of them is going to be wrong. And I would counter to my own point. This is kind of like what I just said with Norby, that Josh Jung, who I'm picking as my bust here, he's kind of free. His ADP is at like right around the 200 range. So like how much can you really bust when you're outside the top 200? But I am picking on him because I will say I found this the hardest of the infield positions to pinpoint like who is going to be my actual bust. Royce Lewis came to mind. I think the top guys, they're so chalky. And then there's this big jump. And it's like, I just don't feel like you're getting a lot of bus in there. Matt Chapman is like amazing value. So I picked Josh Jung. Again, this is the 2023 was great. 2024, absolutely atrocious, especially with some of the hitting profile. I mean, maybe not absolutely atrocious, but 264, 7 homers, 4 stolen bases with Josh Jung. Strikeout rate came down a tiny bit, but a lot of the actual hitting metrics came down. Barrel went down, hard hit absolutely tanked. He had a 240 expected batting average. Don't like any of that. He was struggling with an injury, and I think he's going to get moved down the lineup. So I'm not a big Josh Jung guy, but I really found this to be tough. And I might just be wrong because if he returns back to what he was in 2023, by the way, almost a 50% hard hit rate, 12% barrel. He had some strikeout problems, but he was absolutely crushing the ball in a really good environment. So I might eat my words on this, but like you had to go Norby, I had to go Jung because this was a tough spot to like pinpoint the bust.
All right, my must-have at third base is simple. It's Mark Vientos of the New York Mets. You saw a star being born last year in 2025. That guy was unbelievable. And going back to last year's shows, we talked about his performance in spring training, and you know how enamored I was of him in spring training. I said, he's finally ready. I think he's finally got it. And then the Martinez thing happened, and he took over at DH, and he was very visibly upset about this. And he took it personally, and he went down and he raked, and he got called up, and he did nothing but rake at the major league level, and then had some huge moments in the postseason. Now you're putting him behind Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. And I don't think there's any way, if he stays healthy, he doesn't drive in 100 runs this year. I think he's going to hit over 30 home runs. And if Pete Alonso comes back and you sandwich him between Pete Alonso and Juan Soto in that third spot, oh my God. Mark Vientos is going to be an all-star. Mark Vientos is going to be a guy that is going to become a rock star in 2025. I mean, he could even approach 35 or 40 home runs. That's how good I think Vientos is as a power hitter. And with all of those fastballs he might see and all those guys on base ahead of him, it could be an incredible year for Vientos. I am going to be aggressive on him in 2025. Welsh, who's your must-have at third base?
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Mine is probably a guy that's going to play first base. He's on the other side. Hell, maybe he'll play third base and he'll play more third base for this team and knock off Josh Jung. It's Jake Burger. So I'm kind of staying in that same team where I don't seem to like a ton of the Reds for whatever reason. I have been enamored with a lot of the Rangers players. Jake Burger's just going into a fantastic spot. We've talked about it. Everybody's talked about it. He's coming off a 29 homer season. He's hit 250, by the way. He's the new Chris Davis, Chris with a K. He's hit 253 straight seasons, Jake Burger has. He's a 30 homer lock, and now he's going into one of the better hitting environments out there. He's coming off of hitting with the White Sox and the Marlins. He's now with the Rangers. As long as he doesn't hit in that 8 spot or 7 spot that like Roster Resources putting, 12% barrel, 47% hard hit. He lowered his strikeout rate. He's got an expected average that's around almost 260. Jake Burger is in a phenomenal environment where, by the way, let's just for a minute pretend that he could hit 4 or 5. You've got Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Wyatt Langford in your top 3 spot. Against righties, they're probably going to put Jock Peterson. We'll see what they do with guys like Adolis if he bounces back. You do have Josh Jung, but Burger's an opportunity to hit higher in the lineup. He's already hitting 30 homers. Now the RBIs boost up, and he's going outside the top 100. Must have multi corner infield qualifications for Burger. Got to have him. this is one of my favorite ones we've done so far.
I love this acquisition for the Rangers in the offseason. I thought it was really sharp on their point too. Just give them a little bit more insurance there for the Corey Seagers and Marcus Semyons if they miss more time again in 2025. Let's move on to shortstop. Before we do, a quick reminder, take these names we're giving you and put them on your cheat sheet. Well, how do you make a cheat sheet? I'll tell you. Using the Cheat Sheet Creator, you can enhance your fantasy baseball strategies with the Cheat Sheet Creator, seamlessly integrating and merging rankings from all the experts that you choose. That's right, the experts that you agree with, not just any expert. Or you can take the consensus in with your own, and you can organize players into tiers, personalize notes, and streamline your decision-making process. So when you hook up your draft wizard and sync it to your league, you've got your cheat sheets right there with you in the draft. It's what you need right now. FantasyPros.com/cheat sheet. If you want to dominate your leagues, cheat sheets are a great way to do that. You can check them out today. The Fantasy Baseball Draft Wizard app is available. I'll just remind you again, FantasyPros.com/MLB Draft Wizard, or wherever you get your apps, download that bad boy because it's the ultimate cheat code. Let's get to the shortstops, Welsh, and a guy that I just took in our most recent draft, a guy that I even mentioned in our undervalued show, and he's going to come up here again because he really is a sleeper, I think. I don't hear anybody talking about Jeremy Pena. And when you start to look through this list here, you've got Bobby Witt at the top. You've got Elly De La Cruz. You got Gunnar Henderson, Mookie Betts, Francisco Lindor. Huge names. I think that is the number one tier. Then you've got the Trey Turner, Corey Seager. Okay, we're starting to get into a little bit more shaky ground, but still big-time talent. O'Neal Cruz, a guy, once again, another guy moving positions, going to the outfield. But it's early in his career. That stuff doesn't worry me nearly as much as the veterans when they start to move off positions. CJ Abrams, Willy Adames, Matt McClain, who you already voiced some concern about, Bo Bichette at 12. Then right on the peripheral, you've got Nico Horner, Anthony Volpe, Tovar, all in that group. Tovar was one of my favorite guys last year, had a really good season. But what's so fascinating is I look at the production of Jeremy Pena last year. 15 homers, 70. I think he could easily be a 75 guy, maybe even push that home run total closer to 20. Gave you 20 steals last year, hit 266. And I'm thinking, Anthony Volpe hasn't given me anything quite like that. I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking around, Matt McClain's coming off a major injury. Nico Horner, lots of stolen bases, but doesn't give me quite maybe the power ceiling that I think he might have. And then guys like Xander Bogaerts, Bryson Stott, like these guys are kind of, I think, a little bit underwhelming to me. I know some of them give you a little bit more stolen bases, and I understand why that's coveted in the rotos and the head-to-head roto. But man, Welsh, Jeremy Pena just seems like a guy at my middle infield spot that I think I can plug and play and be very happy with for 162.
Yeah, there were two guys that came to mind when we did this. And by the way, I do think this floats between sleeper, undervalued, however you want to look at it. Number one was Jeremy Pena, and then I saw you had him. So I'm like, I can't put Jeremy Pena on there because I agree.
Advantages of making the sheet up.
Yeah, you got to it first. Completely agree. It's just like somewhere between, 20 stolen bases, 15 homers. By the way, ATC projections on him, pretty good average at 262, 15 homers, 17 stolen bases with a sub 20% K percentage in Houston. Love it. And by the way, he's in some instances been a leadoff hitter, and now you got Tucker out of that lineup. So we'll see what happens. Number two on that list for me, though, was Masyn Winn when I couldn't pick Jeremy Pena. Masyn Winn is coming off of a solid season. He had 267, 15 homers, 11 stolen bases. He spent the offseason working at a lot of those bat clinics, getting in some more body mass, adding muscle, working on bat speed as I usually do. He's been working with Jordan Walker. And, Masyn Winn's profile was sub 18% K percentage. That's relatively elite. Gets the ball in the air, 13-degree launch angle. That's solid. He's walking a bit, but he doesn't have that big explosive barrel hard hit. So how does he get it done? Well, there's a lot of guys in baseball, CJ Abrams, Ha-Seong Kim, I use them as always my examples. Isaac Paredes technically, that have these low barrel like Winn does, low hard hit. So what do? They get under the ball and they get it in the air. Launch angle sweet spot as well is a metric that Baseball Savant does. And that had a huge boost this past year, 26 to 33%. The launch angle, he hits it on the perfect spot to get the ball up in the air. Mookie Betts does that. And now his launch angle went up. So my whole point of this is that's where you're going to start optimizing and getting some home runs. And that's why you can project him in the 15. He's also an aggressive base stealer. He's got a really good hitting profile where he doesn't strike out and make contact. Projections are around 15-15 and like a 250, 260 average on him. I think there's a legitimate opportunity that he can jump up average can go up into the 280s. He could be a 2020 guy, and he's going, 175 to 200 right now. So Masyn Winn is a definite sleeper, kind of must-target player at shortstop.
Yeah, it's funny, Welsh, because I took Pena from you, but my second choice would have been Winn. So we are seeing eye to eye on the sleepers here. Yeah, absolutely. The bust, this one was easy for me. I could not wait to put this name in. Trevor Story. When is enough for everybody? I don't get this, Welsh. I don't understand it.
I like him.
Well, you're going to have to tell me why, because I'm going to give you all the reasons why I don't, and then you can try to sell me as best you can if you want to.
I don't have a good sell, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, he hasn't played 100 games in 3 years since he's been a Red Sox, first of all. The topped out was 93. His splits in Colorado were always massive. I was never a big fan of his in Colorado either. I find him to be a very overrated player that would have some hot streaks. Sure, the numbers were always better because it was Colorado, but I hated this signing when the Red Sox did it. And it was so weird because it's like, you're going to pay Trevor Story, but you're not going to play Mookie Betts. And it's turned out to be one of the worst decisions this organization has ever made. And now they've got these kids coming. They've got the Roman Anthony's coming. They got the Casas coming. They've got Christian Campbell coming. They've got Rafaela. They got all these kids. I think Story is going to get pushed out. I know he's only like 32 years old or whatever he's turning this year. I'm out on Trevor Story. It's this name brand thing where like Chris Bryant was still relevant in every draft for a couple of years. Like, when do we learn? Like, just because a guy was good once upon a time doesn't make him good now or even investable. I think that's the problem. I don't think the guy's even investable at this stage. What are your I know he is still going late, and I get that's probably what you're going to say, but he's free. But at the same time, I would Christian Campbell, Matt Shaw, going after him. And I think you would agree I'd rather take a shot on those guys.
Yeah, I have them higher. So yeah, that's not, well, okay, for me, that's not a disagreement. I completely am with you. But he's free. He is the epitome of, he literally doesn't get drafted in many 12-team leagues. I'm going to say this, and it might be like someone might be able to answer it better, but I'm just going to say it with authority. There's no player that's not being drafted that has 2020 upside if they play the whole season than Trevor Story. Like I can't think off the top of my head a guy that would be on the wire that would go out of your draft not being drafted, that lockdown. If I said, hey, you're getting 140 games out of Trevor Story, you're getting 2020. That's what you're going to get out of him. There's just no other player. So that's why I'm in on it. But he can't stay healthy. So I don't disagree with that. But it's, there's just murderer's row after murderer's row of those guys. I still like the hitting profile. He's young enough. He's just absolutely free. If he doesn't work out, cut him. See ya. But there is 2020.
I don't want to waste draft picks. I guess that's where I'm at. But anyway, who's your bust for this section?
My bust is a big name, and it's more about my disinterest. It's CJ Abrams. Everything is still in his favor. He came off of a 20-30 season, 246 batting average. I mean, obviously insane. The hitting profile still has some, questions. He is barreling. He struck out a little bit more. He hit the ball harder. Like I said before, he optimizes and gets the ball in the air, but he comes at an absolute premium cost, and he ended the season being suspended for staying out all night gambling, and that is a clear issue that is going on. Maybe that doesn't carry over, maybe that's completely fixed. He has had 2 really good fantasy seasons. I just got to tell you, it's the stage we've talked about, the world of overpaying for a lot of strikeouts. It's just not there for me. He's going around a guy like Corey Seager, who I think is an elite 4 category player that does have some injury questions, but he doesn't have suspension questions. He also doesn't have a bad hitting profile. I'm just worried when things go wrong for Abrams, it'll go wrong bad. There's also some off the field stuff. And I just don't feel the need that I want to pay for extreme stolen bases, but still at the same time, hey, well, shut up. He was 20-30. I get it. I'm just not into the cost. So that's why he's my bust.
Well, it's funny because we went for a sleeper last year on both of our lists. And now look, a year later, we're like, okay, and that happens sometimes for us. We love a player. We love the value. We love the upside. And then next year, sometimes the cost is a little bit too much, but it's amazing how much difference, a year can make for a player. All right, my must-have is a guy Welsh already hates at this position. I'm going to say Matt McClain. I've been doing a lot of homework on Matt McClain to see where he's at, reading all the articles, reading all the stuff coming out of his mouth. Arizona Fall League, he hit 4 home runs. The slugging was there. The timing and the batting average wasn't there yet, but I assume that because he hasn't played baseball in a long time. This is a guy that is very crucial what he does in spring for me. I want to make sure he has a good spring. If he does, I feel really good about where he is, despite the fact the ADP, as Welsh pointed out, is still relatively high. And here's the big reason why. I want to take shots on 25, 24-year-old guys who are going to hit potentially, somewhere in the 280 range, But more importantly, you go back and you look at the OBP around 400 in his minor league track record and 500 at the slugging. A guy that's got power in a small ballpark with on-base skills. I want that guy on my team. So Matt McClain, that's your counterpoint for him. Welsh gave you the negatives. I give you the positives. Give me a must-have for you in 2025 at this position.
By the way, if he hits 280, I will eat my word. I do not believe there's a world where he's going to hit 280, but if he does, I'm wrong as hell on Matt McClain. My pick
even if
is
he hits 260 and gives me a 380 on base and a 500 slugging. Man, that's going to be a good player. That's going to be a real good player.
Well, the guy I'm going to pick at shortstop is going after Matt McClain, and he used to be a third round pick in drafts. He seems boring now because he's coming off of his literal worst season ever. I'm saying Bichette is the guy. Bichette is going massively late in drafts because he just hit 226 or 225 with 4 homers and 5 stolen bases in half of a year with a bunch of missed time. But that's coming off of a season where he hit 300 with 20 homers, and he was going in like the third round because, what if he runs a little bit more? And my main thesis across the board is more about like the anomaly is last season compared to his career. He was 9%, 9%, 9% barrel just year after year, 44, 50, hard hit. All of a sudden last year, hard hit absolutely tanks, barrels cut in half, everything fell apart. Even so, his expected batting average was still around 250, but he's around a career 290 guy. He didn't strike out more. He walked a little bit. And he just ended up underperforming specifically against some of that off-speed and breaking stuff. I think those things are going to change this year. I think that was the anomaly, and I think his cost is so depressed. Batting average is going to boost back up. I really think he just helps your team. He can play more as a middle infielder if you need to. Projections have him hitting 274 with 16 homers according to ATC. So I think Bichette at his cost is a must-buy.
Last position here, the catcher spot, and the top 12 look like this. William Contreras at the top, Adley Rutschman next, then Yainer Diaz, Sal Perez, Cal Raleigh coming in at 5. That's your top 5, which is a pretty strong group, I would say. But for me, I'm still, especially in single catcher leagues, 12-team, 15 league, I don't care, I'm waiting. 2 catcher leagues, obviously the calculus changes. Logan O'Hoppe, Will Smith at 6, then Wilson Contreras, Logan O'Hoppe at 8, Shea Langoliers at 9, JT Realmuto at 10, Tyler Stevenson at 11, Francisco Alvarez at 12, and then on the peripheral, you got Austin Wells, Sean Murphy looking for a bounce-back season with Atlanta, like the entire Atlanta Braves team, it seems like, Keibert Ruiz at 15, and then Connor Wong at 16 as you get a little deeper. So, again, it's always the same with me. Number 1, I hate 2 catcher leagues. I think they're stupid. I don't think there's any reason for them. Number 2, single catcher leagues, 12 to 15. There's 12 to 15 guys there that I can live with, and I just don't want to put the investment ahead of time in one of these bigger catchers unless somebody really dramatically falls. So that's the easy look for me. And the sleeper in this list, I can't believe I got 2 Mets on the list I'm going to talk about. I mean, talk about a difference a year makes. But Francisco Alvarez, I don't think we've seen the best out of him yet. Francisco Alvarez has a big-time power potential here, and he could easily pop 25 to 30 home runs in 2025 if everything broke right. I think a lot of last year for him was really getting acclimated to managing the pitching staff and understanding what needed to happen there. And I think sometimes he also got frustrated with getting to slumps, and he was having a hard time turning things around. If you go back and look at the minor league track record of this guy, this was a bat first catcher, right? You know, and it turns out the framing improved and all the other things improved, but everybody talked about Alvarez for the bat, not so much of the defense. And I think Alvarez in this lineup potentially could finally have that breakout season. So he's my sleeper at the position. Who's yours, Welsh?
Yeah, and I was looking, by the way, I believe there's like 9 on ATC catchers projected for 20 or more homers. Francisco Alvarez is the lowest cost of all of those projected catchers. So I think this is a fantastic one. Probably the one I would have picked as well because it's low cost. I have my narrative here with catchers. I just play them late because I play single catcher leagues. I don't want to pay high costs at all. The catcher that I'm going to end up picking, though, is Austin Wells. Trevino out of town. I think that opens up more opportunities for Wells to be out there. ATC projections have him around 18 homers. I was going to pick Ivan Herrera, who had a really nice underlying hitting profile, and he's going to be, I don't know if he's going to be the guy, though, because I got Pedro Pajas because Wilson Contreras is going to move over. But if he were to get like the primary amount, it might be Herrera. But Austin Wells, I think, is locked because I don't think there's enough competition there. I think they want him to be the guy. There's a lot of power. It's a great hitting environment, and he's going outside the top 12. So give me a late catcher and Austin Wells of the Yankees.
All right, for me, the bust is JT Realmuto. I don't like investing in older catchers. I think I saw a lot of decline in him and just watched him last year. And he's a guy, like, he's played so many games at the position. And I know he floats around sometimes in other spots too. You've seen the stolen bases drop off a cliff, from 21 to 16 and then to just 2 last year. I know he only played 99 games, but again, he's going to be 34 years old. I know the Phillies are still a really good team. I'm just out on Realmuto. I think this is another one where you're paying for the past of name brand value. Welsh, who is a catcher that you don't want? Or should I say, what kind of catcher don't you want on draft day?
Good way to phrase it, Joe. Any catcher inside the top 100, I don't want. NFBC ADP, listen, William Contreras is a monster. I love him. Smaller guy to catcher, lots of power. He's on top 25. NFBC ADP since January 1st. But it's a 2 catcher. I get it. But still, in standard leagues, who are the guys that are going to be in there? Adley, maybe Yanni or Diaz. William Contreras is going to be the number 1. I'm not saying they can't come close to returning value. I just don't think the difference of the value on the guys you would invest in the top 100 compared to the other hitters or pitchers you could take,
Great.
then moving down into taking the guy I'm going to have as a must-have, or JT Realmuto, or, handfuls of guys. I just don't think the production difference makes enough sense. So I think investing in the top 100 in a single catcher league, I'm not there. I'd also say even in a 2 catcher league, investing in the top 50 is really not something I want to do. Kind of like even in closers, I would just rather have a little bit more value. You're going to have to pay like closer 7 or 8 in a 2 catcher league is going to still go inside the top 100, but late, I'd rather do that. But no inside the top 100 catchers, please. Sometimes I
agree 1,000% with everything you're saying. My must-have guy, actually, if Ivan Herrera is the everyday catcher, like we come out of spring, that's the guy that I do want. But as Welsh said, that might be a little bit of a muddy situation there. So instead, once again, whatever's old is new again. It's Logan O'Hoppe again for me.
Boy.
He's going to be 25 years old. Look, I got my dudes. And you know what? Like, I had my dudes last year. I had my Camineros, my Durans. Like, those were my guys. I'm just sticking to my guns. And I think that's important for everybody to do when they're going into a season. Identify the players you want and then just drill it into yourself that those are the guys you want. Look, same thing as a guy with power in the minor leagues, hit for a better average in the minor leagues. Like, I just think he had his full season, first full major league season. He's going to be 25 years old. I think there's just a lot of upside there for him to outperform his ADP. He's not going in the top 100 catcher, so I'm allowed to take him. But Welsh, is there somebody just outside the top 100 that if you did want to take a catcher, who would it be?
Yeah, so I definitely want values. And I'm not sure if this guy's going to be a value because people are in on it, but he's right around those middle. And I know this is funny, me saying I want late catchers. I do. But if I were taking and having a little bit more investment, is Willson Contreras. Willson Contreras with the Cardinals is moving off of catcher. He's going to be their first baseman for this year. So that means you're going to get all the games. We're not looking at, 400 at bats, which he had in 2022 and 2023. He only had 301 at bats last year, and he still hit 15 homers. So you're getting a guy that qualifies at catcher, playing first base every day. That's the type of guy that I'm willing to invest in. So Contreras would be the must-have.
Okay, so who are your must-haves? Who's your sleepers? Who's your busts? What's the infield look like to you? Drop your comments below. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to Fantasy Pros MLB. And, of course, ring the bell till it goes ding for notifications so you never miss a moment of fantasy baseball talk here on the channel. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For the Welsh, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids. Happy drafting.
Peace.